Good morning. My name is Gary Davis. I'm the Chief Consumer Security Evangelist with Intel Security. One of the questions I often get, what exactly does that person do? I have kind of a bifurcated role. My primary role is to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in our space, specifically what's affecting consumers today, and help shape our product strategy and our direction to make sure that the things that we're making are material need and interest to consumers. That's first and foremost. Secondly, is I do a lot of this. I spend a lot of time in the media. I've met with almost every major broadcast news network, print, online, and really hopefully get the information out there to educate and inform consumers and media on what's going on in our space and what they need to do to keep themselves safe. My topic today is looking at the intersection of this notion of IoT and security. At the highest level, if there's one thing I wanted you to take away from this session, is this number. If we look at the nature of our business today, and we look at what's going on in our industry, there's some interesting trends that are really affecting some of the way we think about what's going on. And for example, if you recall, last year was the year of the retail breach. About once a week, you heard of a major retailer being breached and losing all your credit card information, which that's bad, no doubt. But on the black market, that credit card is worth about $1 or $2. And the reason it's worth only $1 or $2 is the fact that the credit card companies have gotten really, really good at looking at fraudulent behaviors and turning off credit cards before too much damage can be done. If you fast forward to this year, what we've seen is a very different set of breaches that have really affected our space. And we're seeing a lot of the bad actors are going after healthcare companies. 2 months ago, I think you'll recall, the Office of Personnel Management, which is the federal body which basically vets all clearances for everybody who works in the government, was breached with all the personal information gone. And the reason for that, not perhaps OPM per se, but the reason there's been such a keen interest from the bad actors to go after the healthcare records is because of the value of the data. The data that they're trying to get is worth 10 times that of a credit card. So if a credit card is $1 or $2, the value of the information that they're going after today, that personal information, stuff like your social security number, your address, your date of birth, those types of information which have a long tail, they last forever. It's almost impossible to change. Well, it is impossible to change your date of birth. It's almost impossible to change your social security number, and you have to physically move to change your address. So you have things that are with you forever, which gives them, the bad actors, the opportunity to do some really, really nasty things. Everything from identity theft, insurance fraud. And this is where we're seeing a major uptake this year, especially around insurance fraud, where the bad actors will take your information, they will put fraudulent claims in, and the thing about the healthcare industry, unlike the credit card industry, it's really hard for the healthcare industry because of things like HIPAA and other regulatory measures that are in place to protect the consumer to really have the same level of policing that the credit cards do. So net, if you don't take anything else away from this session today, remember this number, because this is what's driving the behaviors. This is what makes the cyber criminal market estimated to be between $300 billion and $1 trillion. Another interesting tidbit that shows you just the kind of value of the kind of efforts that go on here is that the cyber criminals realize about a 1,400% ROI on the malware that they distribute. So it's a very lucrative market, and it's a very lucrative market in an area that's very hard to adjudicate. For example, if you're sitting behind some international border doing these types of crimes, it's really hard for our police agencies in North America, the United States, to go after those cyber criminals just because of where they're located. So there's a series of different effects that are in play that make the value of the data and the ability to go after the data that's very, very rich and very, very valuable a very keen interest to hackers today. So the whole notion of this is a wearable tech conference, so I want to spend a little bit of time, give you an idea of what's specifically of interest in this space. When you look at the types of data that's being collected, any single device is typically pretty benign, right? If you just have, a fitness monitor versus an insulin pump versus perhaps smart glasses or something like that, any single one device is probably not that interesting. It's the aggregation of all the data that's being collected that really makes this of interest. When you look at spatial data, proximity, looking at your environment, your surroundings, using sensors to understand what's going on in your immediate environment, physical activity, your heart rate, your how many stairs you take, how much sleep you get, your physiological activity. Anyways, all this stuff is being collected on a variety of different devices. And what we're seeing is the collection of this data and the manifestation of that data on your mobile device is bringing forward several risks. And it's the richness of that data that's making this a very interesting thing for the bad actors. And it includes stuff like, by the way, the timer's not going, so I have no idea if I'm on schedule or not. Things like identity theft and fraud, which we already talked about, insurance fraud, stalking. For example, it's really hard, it's really easy, and it's simple to do to really track somebody based on the information that's being collected through these different wearable devices. Extortion, exploitation, rather. This is where it's easy for cyber criminals to use some of this rich data to go after you and say, hey, listen, I've got information about you that if your insurance provider or somebody had that information, it would affect things like payments and stuff of that nature. So trying to keep that information at bay. And robbery. If a cyber criminal knows, based on your spatial information, physical activity, that you're not in your home, and they've been able to get access to the information that shows them where your home is, they know that at that point that they can go in and basically rob and take whatever they want. So from a growth perspective, we're going to see about 800 million wearable devices come online between now and 2020. If you look at the overall IoT space, estimates run from 25 billion to 50 billion, depending on who you're quoting. But let me give you an example of where I think this really becomes interesting in our space. And it's not necessarily a wearable example, but I think it'll make sense to you. Look at the car industry today, right? About a month ago, there was a major topic around a Jeep that was basically hacked using their cell service. For the last 5 years, the security industry has been having a really strong dialogue with the car manufacturer saying, hey, listen, you guys on average have 100 million lines of code in that automobile. Contrast that with, for example, Windows Vista, which at the time was considered a very bloated operating system from lines of code perspective. So the typical car today has almost twice as many lines of code as Windows Vista did. And what we're seeing is that they're not enabling a lot of firewalling between systems. So the radio system can talk to the engine system, that can talk to the brake system, that can talk to the steering system. So there's not a lot of firewalling that really makes these different systems discrete and unable to communicate. And then you look at the attack surface, right? The typical car today has Wi-Fi, GPS, radio, key fob, and cell services all enabled. So any one of those attack surfaces are very simple and easy for somebody with malicious intent to do something nefarious. So fast forward to the Jeep example. About a month ago, a hacker demonstrated how they could take total control of the Jeep. They could change the steering. They could apply the brakes. They could do whatever they wanted to that Jeep while the driver was driving the vehicle. And the driver had no way to counter the actions of the hacker. So that's just one example how an IoT device that hadn't historically embraced security in a meaningful way is now being exploited, and some of the news is coming from that. So if we look at the industry today in general, I want to take you a little bit down memory lane. Microsoft, when they released Windows way back in the day, their intent was to really go grab market share. All right, we wanted to get our operating system there out in mass, so we're going to make it so as many different manufacturers as possible could leverage and use our operating system. Well, that was good because they met their objective. They had critical mass and have the lion's share of the market today. Well, because of what they did, they had to forego a lot of sensible security controls. Thus was the creation of the security industry. Right now, if you look at our malware zoo, and that's the data set that we use to understand how much malware is in the world today, at least that we have, our malware zoo is over 400 million signatures strong. We find on average 6 to 8 new pieces of malware every second of every day. And that's just on the Microsoft platform. You fast forward to Android, and we're seeing the same behavior there, where Google is using Android as this means to let's get every OEM manufacturer to use Android, and then just make it be out there in mass. Well, right now our mobile zoo has 6 million signatures, and it's growing 49% quarter-over-quarter, and we see no end in sight, because now what the malware writers are doing is they're actually repurposing the malware and doing what we're calling kitting. And kitting is taking a piece of malware and basically making it available for sale or for free on the dark web. So it's now getting out there in more and more mass, and we're seeing more things happen with it. And then another interesting thing that happened just a couple weeks ago is there was an exploit that was called stage fright. Stage fright is actually a code snippet that provides rich media services on Android devices. And basically, the long story short is you could do something as simple as sending somebody a text message that would auto-run on that device and ultimately take total control of that device by exploiting the stage fright vulnerability. And right now, at least at the last estimate, there are some 950 million Android devices which are susceptible to the stage fright exploit. And by the way, there was another exploit that was just discovered yesterday. It's a different media server within the Android operating system, which is expected to have that same type of impact. So we're going to see a massive increase in the amount of energy and effort of the bad actors go after mobile devices, specifically Android, just because, again, of the way they were going to market. We fast forward to today, and it's all about IoT. We talked about the fact that there's going to be some 25 to 50 billion devices connected by 2020. And what we're finding is that the IoT device manufacturers are really solving for time to market and convenience. They're foregoing any type of meaningful security controls just to get that device out there. For example, about a month ago, I was on a panel in San Francisco, and one of the panel members talked about this IoT light bulb that was basically broadcasting the password for the Wi-Fi in clear text. Now, we have no idea why they would choose to do that in any reason. Obviously, the whole notion of IoT is to allow you to connect to it as easily as possible, but when you start doing things like that, you start broadcasting that in clear text, it's really easy for anybody that's coming by your home or your work to just hop on that and find their way into your network. I saw a report yesterday that there's this group in Austin that are now using drones to fly over parts of Austin, and they're sniffing out IoT devices and basically determining whether or not they have network security applied, what the security status is. And it was just an amazing thing to watch, but within the span of a couple minutes, they were able to detect about 1,600 IoT devices connected while this drone flies over parts of Austin. So it's a very scary environment where the IoT manufacturers are just not paying any meaningful attention to what's going on in the security space. Last year, HP did some research, and they looked at the top 10 devices deployed in the home. And they found on average that those devices had 25 vulnerabilities each. And from a security perspective, they were the stuff that it's the basics of security. Requiring a password reset, requiring a complex password, making sure that the communications that was going to and from that device were using encryption. Having poor web designs where you could have stuff like cross-site scripting and poor session management would allow somebody to easily go in and exploit either the device or the ecosystem that was in place. So anyways, there's the challenges, as we talked about, is the fact that the IoT device manufacturers are putting these devices out en masse and putting them out there without any meaningful sense for what's going on from a security perspective. So I want to talk just a moment about kind of where the data flows and where we think things are at risk. So the way it kind of works today, and you probably know most of this stuff, is most of the wearable devices connect using Bluetooth. They typically connect to your smartphone. That smartphone will synthesize that information in some capacity and send it off to some cloud server. The cloud server collects the information, does some magical stuff to it, sends it back to the phone, and the phone sends it back to the wearable. And this is all well and good, and it's a well-understood ecosystem. But what we found is that every single one of these places or activities are prone to be hacked, right? Everything from the smartphone to the cloud server to the communications, to be able to sniff the different things going on as the data flows between these different devices and areas is found to be very, very simple, just by the fact of the nature is that the IoT infrastructure has been very, very poor in executing any meaningful security controls. But the thing let me step back for a moment. So there's really two things that we need to be worried about as we look to this. One is data at rest and data in motion. And it's as we look at what happens in these two different use cases, is what the hackers look at and trying to do something to exploit the information that's being collected or distributed. So we look at it when the device is sitting someplace, what can we do to that device to get access to that information and do something nefarious with it? Or as that data starts to move, what can we do from either from a Bluetooth or a wire sniffer to actually pull the data off the information as it's flowing. So those are the two things that we really look at in our space to understand what's going on with the data and what we can do with the data. So from my perspective, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this, today the weakest link is the smartphone. And I'm going to go through several reasons why I think that's the case. First and foremost is that 36% of people do not pin protect their mobile devices. So if you look to your left and you look to your right, one of you doesn't use a pin on your password, a pin on your mobile phone. I have a very good friend of mine. Her pin is 8888. And it's like, are you kidding me? If I'm going to do a brute force attack, that's like the eighth thing I'm going to try, because I know that's one of the things that consumers are going to do, and they're going to do it very easily. So using a pin to make sure that the device is at a minimum protected. And if it has a biometric capability, for example, if you can use your fingerprint to do it, it's a much safer and more secure environment. Secondly, is that only 22% of people install software that allows them to find the phone should it be lost or stolen. Now, what I find really interesting about this is both the PIN plus this ability to locate a lost or stolen device is freely available from the operating system. So why you wouldn't enable this, it's extremely simple to use. And if your device is lost or stolen, I know that when I think about my device and I think about my $700 iPhone, I would brick it in a second if I knew that it was in the hands of somebody that it shouldn't be. Just because I know the type of data is on there. I have every single password. I have all my work product. I have, you can access every bank account that I have if you can get access to my phone. So having the ability to locate that device, should it be lost or stolen, is just huge. And only 14% install third-party security apps. And the reason this is important, it's one thing to scan for that 6 million plus pieces of malware they're trying to get access to that device, but also most of the software today is designed to do additional things. For example, it will look at the different permissions that an app is trying to get access to. For example, if you're getting ready to download a flashlight app, and the flashlight app wants to access your contact information, your call records, and other things like that, chances are you don't want that to take place. Because if those types of things if those permissions are being asked for, chances are that this this flashlight app has other intent with your data. And also, most of the software allows you to know whether or not you're getting ready to connect to a spoofed Wi-Fi. One of the most common hacker tricks that we know of today is that you go into a public coffee shop or an airport or something like that, you'll look at the top broadcasting SSID, and what a hacker will do is they'll set up their own Wi-Fi hotspot. They'll use that same broadcasting SSID and put a space at the front. So basically their hotspot becomes the number one spot, and everybody starts to connect to that. And the second you start doing that connection, you're able to collect every bit of information that goes to any of those devices. A good case in point, we actually demonstrated this 2 years at our Focused User Group conference, where we set up a mock Wi-Fi hotspot, and we demonstrated how we could simply take control of any device, and in this case we chose an iPad. And not only did we were able to sniff all the data that went to and from that iPad device, we could also go on the device itself and look at every piece of data that was on the device. So, when you connect to a spoofed Wi-Fi hotspot, nothing but bad things can happen. Only 8% install software that can erase the phone's data. Again, going back to my early statement that if I was to lose my phone, in a second I would brick it just because of the value of the data. We did some research a couple years ago, and it was a global research where we asked some 5,000 consumers around the world to help us understand the value of the data on their mobile device. And the worldwide average was $38,000. So when they looked at their phone and they looked at the type of information that was on that phone and how they use that phone, it was very valuable. But the catch-22 for this is when they look at those devices, they still think of it as a phone. They don't think of it as this rich computing environment which is allowing me to connect and do all those things that I could do with my PC and other devices, so that in their mind it's still a phone because it hasn't had some of the, for lack of a better word, victimization that some of the other devices have had over the years. So consumers still, for the most part, treat that device as a phone, despite the fact that they think that the data on there is worth $38,000 on average. And finally, only 7% use security features such as encryption to lock the device. This is, again, so simple in my mind. It's free to do, and should your device become lost or stolen and you don't choose to lock it or wipe it, it's just as simple as somebody connecting it via a USB connection to their laptop, and they have access to everything on the device. So having the device fully encrypted just makes it super simple and super smart. Another thing that really kind of drives the point home of the fact that the smartphone is the weakest link today is that 40% of robberies in the major U.S. cities involve mobile devices. Last year, there was an estimated 30 million devices that were lost or stolen. And what we're seeing, what happens, it used to be that when those devices were lost or stolen, the bad guys would try to root the phone and try to sell it on the black market or the gray market. Now what they're doing today is they're trying to access that device, try to find information like, who is this person? Where do they live? What can I do with this device? For example, if they got access to my phone, they could unlock my front door, they could start my car, they could change the temperature in my house. Again, they have unfettered access to all my financial information. So they're getting smarter about stealing these devices and trying to do bad things with the information they get from them. I want to take you back just a couple years. A couple years ago, there was this kind of silly game called Flappy Birds that was real popular for a while. And the author of the application had this notion of, oh my God, my game is addictive, and I need to take it down. So the second the author took the game down, we saw all these Flappy Bird clone games come on the stores, and we found that almost 80% of those had malware attached to them. And some of it was, at least from our perspective, pretty benign malware. It would do stuff like make calls without the user permission, send premium SMS message and stuff like that. But some of that went to the point where it actually root the device and take total control of the device. So we're seeing this happen more and more often. We talked a little while ago about stage fright, affecting 950 million devices and getting to the device. I could send you an MMS right now. It would hit your device, and if you had auto download on, it would automatically read that MMS file and activate the malware, and I could take total control of your device. Now, we haven't done that yet. We haven't actually seen that in the wild, but that's what could go on today. So, again, the Flappy Bird author, took his software down for all the right reasons, just to have all these bad actors come on and try to clone his software and try to do all sorts of bad things with it. So what do we do? What do we do to help protect? Typically when I do this presentation, I'll talk about what do we do with the ecosystem, what do we do with wearables, what do we do with the device manufacturers and everything like that. But in the interest of our time today, I wanted to just focus on mobile since, as I said before, I felt that was the weakest link. A couple things you can do. You can PIN or password protect that device. And if I was you, I would actually look at using stuff like multi-factor authentication. We have spent the last forever trying to convince consumers of the necessity of using complex passwords. But despite our best efforts, every time there's a breach, the top 10 passwords never change. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, password 1, I love you. There's the top 10 literally have not changed as near as I can tell for the past 10 years. So despite our best efforts to try to communicate and educate consumers on the necessity of changing their passwords and using complex passwords, it just hasn't happened. So we're finally got to the point where we can do things like multi-factor authentication, which will allow you to access that device without using passwords. Because phones today, matter of fact, every device you buy has typically three things. It typically has a microphone, it typically has a camera, and has all sorts of proximity sensors to know what's going on in the environment. So the combination of those three things, plus other types of things that we can garner, for example, we know if you're about to do something from your host behind a known good firewall. So taking all these things into account, we're very close to a place where just by sitting down with that device, the device knows who you are and what you have the ability to go do without you having to remember any passwords, and do it in such a way that's going to provide a high level of confidence when you go to do these things online that you are who you say you are. Be mindful of permissions. And one of the things that we've seen over the past couple quarters is the malware writers, instead of targeting the operating system, which they've historically done for Android, they're actually targeting the games. Right? The reason they're doing that is because the gamers, when they deploy to the games, they open up literally every single permission the phone has to offer. So since they're collecting all this rich data, it's easier for a malware writer to target the app, the permissions from the app, instead of trying to do something at the root or the core level. So be mindful of the permissions when you're downloading apps. Make sure that you apply OS and app patches. I can't stress this strongly enough. And it's a bit of a catch-22. As soon as Google understood they had the stage fright exploit that was being broadcast, they actually patched it in a really quick amount of time. However, one of the big struggles in the industry is the actual deployment of that fix to the devices takes too much time because it actually has to go through the carriers. So the carriers have to redo the software, deploy it out to the devices. And we're just seeing way too much of a lag between the time that these exploits are being discovered and they're actually being deployed and fixed on the phone. So that's something that I would encourage you to do is if you hear about things like stage fright or these other things that have these broad sweeping types of effects, reach out to your carrier and say, guys, you need to get me this patch straight away. Otherwise, again, there's just no real motivation for them to do it too quickly. Turn on the locate and lock capability. I've talked about that at exhaustion. Turn off non-essential antennas. If you have Bluetooth, if you have Wi-Fi, it's going to do two things. First of all, it's going to prevent somebody from tunneling back in that device, but it's also going to save battery life. Right? So turning off antennas that you don't need to use, go ahead and turn them off. It's really simple to do anymore. Install security software, install full device encryption, and stay with trusted app stores. One of the things that we find is that the Google Store, and obviously the iTunes Store do a pretty good job of making sure that malware being deployed on those sites is minimized. But some of these third-party sites do not have the same sort of rigor. We're seeing a lot more applications being launched at those stores, which you actually ultimately get to the device. I want to talk to you for a moment for what I call the ultimate hack. So a couple of years ago, again, at our user group conference, the thing we demonstrated, we took a bidirectional handheld antenna that we bought at Radio Shack, connected it to a computer, and basically demonstrated how we could take total control of an insulin pump, right? And if you're a diabetic, you know the kind of consequences that can come for somebody taking control of that insulin pump. We could do everything to the device. We could turn it on, we could turn it off, we could change dosages, we could actually totally drain all the insulin into your system at once. And it's my understanding if you activate that capability, the user is terminal within 5 minutes. So this is an extreme use case, but it demonstrates just how important and how topical this is as we see more and more of these devices get deployed in mass, the ability for bad things to happen is becoming more and more apparent. We saw about 3 months ago where all the major, not insulin pumps, but the IV drips and pumps used in the hospitals all contain the same vulnerability. Well, the device manufacturer said, well, it doesn't matter because we're not connected to the internet. Well, you kind of are, because those devices connect to the hospital network. The hospital network connected to the internet, and we were able to demonstrate how coming through the internet to the hospital network, we could go to these IV pumps and actually change the dosages on them without anybody knowing. So these are the types of things that are happening in the space today and really keep us awake at night trying to figure out, okay, what's the next thing that's going to happen and what can we do to make sure that we're doing our best to educate both the device manufacturers as well as consumers and everybody we can on some of the things that happen in the space. So what I ask for you is stay engaged. There's all sorts of data out there that suggests that you can be mindful of what's going on in the space. Help us help you by educating people to be mindful of what it takes to be a safe online citizen. We are working desperately hard with the industry to develop security standards that are required. So every device manufacturer would adhere to these to make sure that there's a minimum set of security that's built into every IoT device that's deployed. And we need to collaborate because this isn't over yet. We're seeing the evolution of our space is happening at a pace that we've never witnessed before. The volume of new malware that we're experiencing, as well as the attack surfaces, and all the other things we talked about are increasing at an alarming rate. And we have to continue to evolve the way we do our security to make sure we're having the safest possible environment. So before I go, and I have no idea how far I am on the timeline, before I started, I have my second phone. It's a Android Samsung Galaxy 5. And I actually started a Bluetooth sniffer. And so the entire time I've been up here, I've in essence snooped every single Bluetooth device in here and got all sorts of information about it. I've got the device name, the MAC address, the signal strength. When I drill down, I can look at longitude, latitude, location. So I could do all sorts of things with this. If I asked my labs organization to do, I could actually collect any data that's being transmitted by those devices. I could stalk you. I could, without you even knowing, I could follow you around all day at a healthy distance because I have the exact information about you at any given time. And I'm happy to show this to everybody. I'll pass it around. Let me go back. So here's all the stuff. All right. So anyways, every single Bluetooth device that's been in here for the past, I don't know, however long I've been up here talking, I've been able to collect and sniff, the type of device, the address that the device has, the name of the device. Do you turn your Bluetooth off? Never mind. Anyways, any questions? I don't know how much time we have left. Any questions? All right. Well, I thank you for your time this morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. And follow me on Twitter. I'm always broadcasting this sort of stuff. Thank you.